Hello, Canucks fans. I had to sneeze so bad as soon as the intro was playing. That was crazy. That was chaotic. Hello, Canucks fans. Welcome back to the episode of Canucks Conversation, brought to you by Bet365. Check out Bet365's 3-goal early payout. When your team goes up 3, you get paid. It's that simple. Download the app today. Must be 18 plus. Please play responsibly. My name is Dave Woodrelli. I am joined by Harmon Dial, and we are coming to you from the Pacific Toyota Dealer Studios. Visit shoptoyota.ca or your local Pacific Toyota dealer today. Okay, we live in different areas of the lower mainland, Harm. Sunny out where you were in the morning and then rainy in the afternoon, because that's what I've gotten here.
Cloudy most of the morning, a little bit of light drizzle in the afternoon, but I also see some blue sky. It's kind of that
Okay.
weird in between.
Yeah. Yeah. Underrated weather is that in between where it's, you see the blue sky, but it's still kind of chilly. Underrated. That's underrated. I got bird out this morning. It was a good start to the day because now it's pouring rain and I don't want to be outside much anymore. But we'll talk more about the weather later on in the show. If you want to make sure your question or comment, even if it's about the weather, gets on the show, hit us with a super chat. Proceeds from our super chat go to the BC Mental Health Foundation. Changing the face of mental health and addiction by spreading breakthroughs in care, public understanding, research, and knowledge exchange. We're going to talk about the game last night. Canucks lose to the Ducks. Everyone looked like they had fun at Rogers Arena, Harm. Do you agree? It sure looked like a fun game to me. A lot of back and forth. What did we say yesterday? We said, okay, we hope that this is at least, you got these young teams, just some high-flying action. The amount of stretch passes, two-line pass rule was getting broken a ton last night. The amount of stretch passes out of the zones, out of the defensive zone, was remarkable. And even I jotted this down in instant reaction. Even the Canucks blue liners, Tom Willander, Zeev Buium, not afraid to make plays with the puck, skating the puck up the ice, snapping the puck up the ice in a hurry, and then joining the rush. I liked what I saw from those two guys in particular, but all in all, just a fun game, even though the Canucks lost.
Yeah, fully agree. It was entertaining. They were creating chances, both sides, right? The Canucks certainly had some defensive breakdowns as they usually do, but that's the expectation at this point from Vancouver defensively. Now it's, all right, can you at least generate things offensively and keep these games competitive where, all right, if you're going to be leaky in your own end, at least compensate for it with what you create in the attacking zone and make sure you have meaningful puck possession and some of your younger players have opportunities to get involved offensively. And it truly felt like that. Even, especially the first period, you kind of use that sometimes as a gauge to see what kind of night could it be. And right from the drop of the puck, it felt like, all right, the Canucks are in this game. I thought they genuinely played well. They had stretches where they were generating quite a few looks. And one of the funnest parts of that game, I thought, was watching the Canucks power play go to work, which how long has it been since we've been able to say that? Where on the Jake DeBrusk goal, you love the puck movement back and forth. And I'll go back again to Marco Rossi. I think his impact at the left circle of that power play has really revitalized that unit. I know he didn't get an assist on either one of the power play goals, but right before the assists, you see him making clever little saucer passes in the buildup of those sequences. I think that's so important to having a unit that's snapping the puck around quickly, decisively. I think before the first unit power play, passes were made and then players would hang on to the puck too long. It's as if the players would get the puck and then decide what they were going to do next. And that makes a power play look static. It makes it predictable from the PK's perspective. Whereas I think Rossi's impact, he's just been able to quicken things up with his passing ability. And I mean, you top it off with the deception Hronek had on that second goal, where that Ducks penalty killer was sprawling all over the ice, thinking Hronek was going to unleash a bomb, and then he finds Besser on the back door. And you like to see Brock Besser as well. Now that he's heating up a little bit offensively, I think earlier in the season, from that sharp of an angle, he might have held onto the puck and then tried to look for a pass, but instead he immediately believes in his shot and one times it in. I like to see the conviction, and that power play has been a lot of fun to watch since Marco Rossi ended up on that left circle.
100% agree with you. I wrote that down in instant reaction as well, noting the Rossi's impact on the power play. I want to get to a couple comments from the chat before we get to Jeff, which we'll do in a second here. This was from LC250, season ticket holder, told us yesterday. Said, I was at the game. It was a fun game. Indeed. Silo in the chat said, the power play looks decent when Hronek is passing to the left side. He can't pass to the right side with any deception or accuracy. Miss L in the chat said, every time Gudas touched the puck, he got booed. That's what I mean. It's like, okay. And someone in the chat said, why did we boo Gudas? For me, when I saw it, I was thinking immediately the reason was because he hurt Sidney Crosby. Do you agree with me about that?
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Which is elite ball knowledge from Canucks fans. Like, that is absolutely elite ball knowledge. And I love it. I love to see it. And that's what I mean. You talk about a rebuild. You talk about, I don't know if this city's going to buy into this. First of all, absolutely they are. We've said that enough times. But, like, this market knows hockey. Like, this market is passionate about hockey. They understand the sport beyond just the Canucks as well. So, anyway, it's just, I don't want to revisit this whole, can this market handle a rebuild? I don't know. Building last night suggested they absolutely could, especially if the team puts in an effort, right? Like, all you want to see is an effort. That was an honest effort. And I'll give you another one. Agree or disagree? And this is what we'll open with Jeff as well. I want your take quick. Agree or disagree? This is the lowest point in the Canucks rebuild from an on-ice perspective.
It should be. I agree because this year you're going to get a top 3 pick. You're hopeful that ends up being one of McKenna or Stenberg. And then now you're able to start integrating that exciting young talent into your lineup. Whereas it's almost like you think about the last phase of, it wasn't even a rebuild, right? The Canucks were just intentionally bad, but you think about those dark days.
Unintentionally bad is what you mean to say.
Unintentionally bad. It got progressively better each time the Canucks brought in an exciting rookie, right? First it was Brock, then it was Paterson, then it was Hughes. The Canucks had 3 straight Calder Trophy finalists, and I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen again. In fact, that's really rare. I think the Canucks might have been the only team in NHL history to have that happen.
Them and the Habs. Yeah.
But the point being, once you're able to start getting some of these really exciting players and really high picks into the door one after the other, then fans have something to cling on to and be excited about even when you're losing. And with all due respect to Buium and Willander, and fans are still excited about those guys. Don't get me wrong. Every time I run into a Canucks fan in person, they're gushing about how excited they are about the future state of the decor in 4 or 5 years. But it's different if it ends up being a McKenna or a Stenberg, or next year if it ends up being a Landon DuPont or an Alexei Joseph. So yeah, this is the low point. You haven't found that franchise pillar yet. You're hopeful that that's coming soon.
All right, let's get to Jeff Patterson, who joins us. He's a presentation of our friends over at Greta, a great spot for all games, home and away. You can skip the line and not have to pay cover on game nights if you're wearing the home team's gear. And of course, there's also the game day specials at Greta, including $3.33 off select food items, $3.33 for select drinks, and more. With the arcade, bar, and street food menu, Greta's a great spot. Make it your spot to watch the next game. 50 West Cordova Street is the address. Let the games begin. Jeff Patterson joins us now. Jeff, you were in the background. Apologize for making you wait, but you heard what we're going to open with here. Agree, disagree, this should be this will be the lowest point of the Canucks rebuild.
Well, first of all, it's sunny here in North Vancouver, and it's always sunny and rainbows in my world, especially when I'm on with you guys, and I just like to deliver joy and made a career of that. So let's continue along those lines. I guess if we look at the minutia of the rebuild, I'm going to just hold off answering this question entirely until the Canucks play the back-to-back games in Colorado and Minnesota next week, because it has a chance to take a dark turn then. Then maybe it starts on the incline back to respectability. But honestly, like, they start this, the road trip starts in Calgary. Then they got this gauntlet of Vegas, Colorado, Minnesota, Utah, and Vegas again. So outside of like the St. Louis game on Saturday and Calgary this coming Saturday, every other opponent the Canucks play the rest of the way still has something significant to play for. And I think that's really interesting. And I sort of explored that with Adam Foote this afternoon about, we always talk about the role of spoiler, right? But realistically, like, do these guys buy into the idea of being spoilers? Is it something that Adam Foote would vocalize to his team? Is it part of their preparation? Or is that the byproduct of doing the right things, playing the right way, playing like they did for the most part last night? And if they do those things, maybe they do get some wins that impact their opponent's playoff hopes and chances or positioning. And Foote sort of leaned that way, that, he's not going to go into the room and let's beat the Kings so that we can be spoilers. But it is interesting to note that 3 of the final 12 for the Canucks and 3 of the final 11 for the Los Angeles Kings are head-to-head. So the Canucks are going to play a huge role in how this story unfolds for the LA Kings, who are a couple of points back in Nashville right now in the race for the second wild card, and they still have a game head-to-head at Crypto.com. So it's right there for them. All these teams that have kind of been spinning their wheels and scuffling. But it's just kind of interesting that, we get to the end of March and the Kings haven't even played a game in Vancouver. Like, they are 2 of the remaining 4 games on the Canucks home schedule. They'll also be the home finale. So they're going to get a steady dose of the Los Angeles Kings, and they'll have a role in the outcome ultimately for the Kings in their playoff push. So spoilers, not spoilers, depends how you look at it, I suppose. But that road trip next week, there's potential pitfalls still ahead for the Vancouver Canucks in terms of absolute rock bottom. But in the big picture, I think I understand what you're getting at, that yes, with the players that they've got, adding another high draft pick, adding Braden Coots in theory next year, you do want to believe that they are leaving the worst behind. Boy, I hope they're leaving the worst behind here.
J-Pat, I want to ask you about Linus Karlsson. Last night he plays 16:57, which is a big bump from where he's usually at. And interestingly, I looked at his ice time for the season as a whole, and it's not a total surprise because I remember talking about Linus Karlsson deserves more ice time all the way back in December. For the season as a whole, he's averaging 11:59. And when you consider how talent deprived this Canucks team is, how productive he's been at 5-on-5, how promising his two-way metrics look, he just strikes me as a player that's been underutilized. So I wanted to get your take. A, are you surprised that it's taken this long for his ice time to start ramping up over these last few games? And secondly, what do you make of his season as a whole and what he means to this team moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a disastrous season, but there have been a few bright spots. Philip Hronek's played, Drew O'Connor's production, and I would put Linus Karlsson emerging as a legitimate National Hockey Leaguer and earning a contract that sort of backs that statement up. Now, like anybody that's still trying to find their way in the NHL, it's been spotty. There have been some highs in and around Christmas when he earned that contract. Like that road trip right after the Quinn Hughes trade, like it looked like he had absolutely arrived. He was racking up points and he was playing some with Elias Paterson then. And then he got the contract. And if you track it back, like the first month after the contract signing, and he's not the first guy in hockey to go through it, but I don't know if he exhaled and he kind of felt like maybe he had arrived. Some of the pressure was off. He went quiet, too quiet, quite frankly, but he's been better of late. And there was a shift there in the third period. I think was it with DeBrusk got promoted and Teddy Bluger, and they were absolutely buzzing. Like it was amazing that they didn't put the puck in the net for the tying goal. So, yeah, I mean, look, we've talked about going back to Rick Tocchet. This guy got Stanley Cup playoff games because they liked, his board battles and wall work and all that kind of stuff and the staples of the Rick Tocchet era. And he's leaned into that and he's continued to grow and develop his game. And we know what he did last year in the American Hockey League and certainly in the playoffs and the push to the Calder Cup. And, it hasn't translated for Arshdeep Bains, and it hasn't translated necessarily for Aatu Ratu, to some degree Max Sasson, although he's gone quiet here of late. But of that bunch, Linus Karlsson stands alone as a guy that, put in the time, honed his craft down in the minors, and has now arrived here as a middle six forward. I'm not convinced that there's top six utility there, although on this team right now with the talent, if he gets shots up higher in the lineup, then great, I'm all for it. In saying all that, Harm, though, and you probably saw it against St. Louis the other night, they're down a goal. It's a 2-1 hockey game in the third period, 4 minutes to go, and Evander Kane gets a shift in place of Linus Karlsson and make sense in any world. And so, it's still some baffling deployment decisions on the part of the coach, but Karlsson's just got to keep doing what he's doing. I will say this, and boy, I got some pushback on it. I wrote about this last week that, in my mind, Linus Karlsson stands alone as the poster boy for the Canucks development system. As we said, all the years down in Abbotsford, there was consistency. He continued to produce and score and worked his way up. But in the years ahead, there have to be some other guys that follow that sort of plant him as the poster child for the development system. If we go 3 years from now and we're all looking back at 30-point Linus Karlsson and saying that's the best example of Canucks player development, then something has gone sideways here. So the development system has to have the players ultimately, but we look at the long list of second-round picks that just haven't panned out for the Vancouver Canucks of late. Now they've stockpiled all these second-rounders as they start to bring more of this talent into the organization. They've got to develop. Like when I look at, look around the National Hockey League, take Montreal for an example. Yes, the Habs, Slafkovsky was the first overall pick, but they've absolutely crushed it with Caulfield and Demidov. But then they got Lane Hudson in the second round, and he emerged. And the Canucks need to find a few of those guys where it's not just the first rounders. If they're going to surround their best players with more good players, then they're going to have to develop a couple of these second rounders that they have stockpiled. And so we're getting ahead of ourselves. They can't do it today, but I just think 3 years from now, it'll be interesting to look at who stands out as sort of the best story of player development for the organization. And if it's still Linus Karlsson, hey, good for him, but maybe not necessarily for the rebuild and the plans of the organization.
Jeff, we've got so many questions for you in the chat, but one guy you mentioned there that I wanted to visit again is Jake DeBrusk. Last night scores a power play goal and then, gets tapped on the shoulder out there for a 5-on-5 shift. Who are his line mates? Atu Ratu and Curtis Douglas. Are you surprised by the deployment of DeBrusk right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, truth to him, he would be too, a little bit. He certainly didn't sign up to be a fourth line guy on the Vancouver Canucks. And, if you play him higher in the lineup than somebody else is dropping, we understand, Evander Kane is sort of the elephant in the room, and we get it as he closes in on 1,000 games. And Adam Foote telling me after practice that the plan is to play him now these next 3 to get him to 1,000 on Monday in Vegas. That Foote had said he had considered the idea of sitting him a couple of games so that he could play his 1,000th game at Rogers Arena, a Vancouver boy, have family and friends in attendance. There will be a silver stick ceremony whenever he gets there, at Rogers Arena in a following home game. But it sounds like the plan right now is to just roll Evander Kane for the next 3. So, perfect world, Evander Kane wouldn't be occupying a top 6 wing spot on this club, and certainly not down the stretch, but that's where we are in all of this. And so as a result, a guy like Jake DeBrusk finds himself sort of as the odd man out. It's unfortunate for him. He had gone ice cold. I think last night broke a 7-game pointless streak. Now, part of that is his deployment, but he was lights out good on the power play for the first 3 months of the season. And then his power play, that last night was his first power play goal since January the 8th in Detroit. So he's been out there on every power play, and those greasy goals around the crease and the blue paint, they just haven't been there for him. It's been a weird year, but I am a little bit surprised that, even if we're looking at the left wing depth chart, that Max Asone is getting an opportunity to play ahead of him. So, I come back to this idea that in the summer, Jake made it to the trade deadline now, but it wouldn't shock me if he kind of took stock of where he sits in all of this, and this isn't what he signed up for. And we've seen others who have come to that conclusion. And so ultimately we'll see where it goes. But he's such a good guy. I do feel for him that, that's his lot in life right now, is playing on a line with Atu Ratu, who's really struggled to produce, and Curtis Douglas, who, has yet to score a goal, although he came close. He had that partial breakaway from the top of the circles down. He and DeBrusk got a 2-on-1 in the first period last night that didn't amount to much, but it did happen. So, kind of curious to see how these final 12 play out for Jake DeBrusk.
I think we know it's going to take time for the Canucks to get back to being a competitive team. It's certainly not going to be the quick turnaround that I think they initially hoped for when they made the Quinn Hughes trade. And so I've got an interesting question with that in mind. I'll give you an opportunity. If you need to pull up the Canucks roster page or Daily Faceoff, go ahead and do that. If you look at the current Canucks roster how many of those guys, I'm not even going to say the next great Canucks team, I'm going to say the next competitive Canucks team that makes the playoffs. How many of the guys on the current roster, not including like Braden Coots and the prospects that are out, how many of the current guys are going to be on the next Canucks team that makes the playoffs?
Well, it's funny you ask, because the Monday mailbag, that question was basically posed as the next time the Canucks get to the playoffs, how many of the guys on the current roster will be on that roster? Now, there's a lot of moving parts there because we don't have a crystal ball to know the next time they're going to be in the playoffs. And yeah, I think it might be a little longer than some people would hope. And so, if we use 3 years as an example, and even that may be optimistic, who's going to be around in 3 years? And I think you look at the Anaheim Ducks last night as a good example. Like, for a long while there, if you had asked anybody in hockey, Trevor Zegras and Jamie Drysdale would have been part of the next core of the Anaheim Ducks for sure, right? And so this is just a cautionary tale that the guys the Canucks have now, that for all the talk of Zeev Buium and Tom Willander and DPD and Victor Mancini, and they've already got their 4, not so fast. Like, the hockey world moves quickly. And, if the Canucks don't win the lottery and they end up with Keaton Verhoff, perhaps, like, all of a sudden that makes some of those guys that I just mentioned perhaps redundant and expendable. And so that idea, that letter that went out to the season ticket members about the new core is here and ready to break through, like, all I could think of was, hang on a second. Yes, you've got young players, but you can't identify them as core pieces. As much potential as Zeev Buium and Tom Willander show, like, honestly, their performance is a little underwhelming in my mind. Like, they're getting their 20 minutes a night right now. And yeah, there's a breakout here and a breakout there, but like, I want some tangible takeaways. Even in this lost season, like, I still want to see some of those forays into the offensive zone amount to something. So I just throw that out there to sort of slow the roll on all of this, that I think for a rebuild, you try to put the pieces in place, but maybe you come to the conclusion at some point that some of those guys that you thought were going to be foundational pieces ultimately aren't, and that you can replace them with things that you think are better. You can use them as assets to trade to address other needs in the hockey club. So it's a really difficult question to answer about who's going to be here, because we don't even know who's going to be in charge of the rebuild, but beyond that on the roster. So I'm not trying to evade the question in any way. I think it's almost too soon right now to even be projecting who's going to be on the roster the next time this group gets around to the playoffs. As much as people fall in love with their own prospects, again, just because they're here now doesn't mean that they're always going to be here. And certainly the next core of this hockey club has not been cemented, not for a second, regardless of what they said in a letter to their season ticket holders.
Jeff, one of those guys I want to focus on, Zeev Buium. I think he's looked better in recent weeks. Again, we talked about it off the top. Him and Willander starting to just take some more risks, starting to try to make some things happen with their high level of skill that they both possess. With Buium specifically, some rumblings that the Canucks are going to try to sign him to a contract extension this offseason. What are your thoughts on that and Buium as a whole, really, as we kind of head into the stretch run of the season?
Yeah, well, as I said, like, I don't want to sound like I'm down on Zeev Buium. I'm making it abundantly clear in my mind that I'm still trying to figure out what is top end with this guy. And
Totally fair.
Draft pedigree is there. He just turned 20. I understand that, a 20-year-old playing in the National Hockey League. But then I look at, Matthew Schaefer as an 18-year-old playing 32 minutes last night. And so I've made this comparison on other shows. I get Matthew Schaefer was a first overall pick, but Zeev was a high pick himself. So maybe not a perfect comparison, and maybe you have to grant that Schaefer, as a first overall pick, some of this was expected, maybe not to the heights, but as an 18-year-old, he's going to have a 60-point season like that. It's possible. I was watching Washington and Colorado the other day on Sunday. 6 minutes to go. Capitals are trailing. Cole Hudson, in his third NHL game, is out there on a power play and picks up an assist on an Alex Ovechkin goal that ties the game against the best team in the National Hockey League. And this is where I come back to, since the Olympic break, like, Willander and Buium have played a lot, like almost 20 minutes a night. Like, they are playing the kids, and they each have 2 points. And so as I watch Zeev Buium, the Tyson article was terrific. The quotes, it was just banger after banger. the head on his shoulders. He's a smart kid. He's articulate. Like, I like all of that. I see the confidence that you talked about, Dave. It's not amounting to much on a last place hockey club. And so there are, circumstances certainly dictate all of that. I get it. But, one area, and you guys tell me, do we know what kind of shot Zeev Buium has? Like, I and we went through this with Quinn Hughes. Does he have a shot, an NHL shot, and then he worked on it and it became a strength and he scored a bunch of goals? But like, one thing as I watch Zeev Buium, most of the time he's putting pucks to the net. It is a wrist shot. And there's nothing wrong with that. You're not, the days of Al McInnes essentially blowing pucks past goalies, that era is gone. But I think that's an area of game that I don't know. And maybe you guys can tell me I'm wrong on this one, but I'm not sure what sort of level of shot Zeev Buium has when you see Phil Hronek blasting shots and, getting guys to scramble out of the way because they don't want to get hit by a second shot like last night on that power play. So, again, I don't want to sound like I'm down on Zeev Buium. I'm still in the information gathering. I don't think that the body of work here in Vancouver is to a point that I would feel comfortable going, 8 years and huge money. And I heard Dollywell talking about Luke Hughes money over $9 million a season. I get the cost certainty part of it. I know the cap's going up and all of those types of things, but maybe I'm still a little jaded on the last 8-year max deal that they gave out in this city that hasn't exactly panned out for the hockey club. So it's the cost of doing business, with guys that are coming off their entry-level deals. I understand all of that. But I want to see just a little bit more here from Buium to help me believe that, he's going to be more than sort of a 40 or a 45 point defenseman and that the ceiling is actually higher than that. Again, they had a generational defenseman in Quinn Hughes, couldn't surround him. He's not here. I'm still not fully certain what they've got with Buium at this stage.
And Jeff, just a quick follow to that, just because I find it interesting. The part that I struggle with is how do you measure how much of that is playing on a bad team, but B, on a team, let's be honest, where the coach isn't really coaching much. Like, it doesn't seem like anyone's gotten better.
No, the environment for sure. And so I do think that muddies the sort of evaluation process a little bit here that, as you said, in recent games and again last night, there were moments where you see head up, takes the puck, off and running with it. But I think of the goal that he scored against New Jersey in January, just before he got hurt. Face-off play, off the wall, head fake, cuts to the middle, follows his own rebound. I think without a doubt, that is his high watermark in terms of a singular play. I just don't know what's second on the list. Like, there haven't been a lot of those moments where you're left going, damn, that's going to be on the regular with this player. Maybe it will be. But that's why I'm saying over these final 12 games, I just wanted to leave a little bit more of a mark and ultimately at the end of the night find his way onto the score sheet. But you're right, on a team that doesn't score much and he's not getting first power play reps, which at this stage, I'm not sure. I would be loading him up and giving him that opportunity, but they're electing to go in a different direction there. So we'll see how it all plays out. Again, there's a ton of potential there without a question, and I want to recognize that. But I do think it is tough to evaluate fully in this environment.
So I agree that we don't know what Buium's ceiling actually is, right? He's still so young, and we don't know whether, as you alluded to, whether he's going to be a 40 to 45 point defenseman moving forward who has more of a second pair impact, or whether he's going to turn into a star top pair guy that can put up 70 points as a defenseman in this league. Fully agree on that. And the other point I'd make is, first, this is something we talked about with Scott Wheeler as well. I think Schaefer and even Cole Hudson to this point are exceptions rather than the rules. When it comes to young defensemen, we've rattled off the list, Lev Shanov and Nemec and Luke Hughes and all these guys just having a lot of ups and downs. Sam Dickinson took Brent Clark a lot of time to figure things out in LA. So I'm willing to give him a little bit more grace there, especially because of the environment context. But for me, why I would be aggressive if I was the Canucks about wanting to extend Buium in the offseason is, even if Buium only becomes a 40 to 45 point defenseman and doesn't hit that high-end ceiling that we think he potentially has, depending on the number in a massively inflating cap climate, that could still be a totally reasonable number, right? So, for example, Dollywell's throwing around the Luke Hughes comp. I think that's a very player-friendly comp. There's no way Buium's going to be able to command $9 million, right? Coming off the season he's had at this point. Like, Luke Hughes had a couple of like 40-plus point seasons when he signed that contract. Same thing with Jackson Lacombe, right? So realistically, Buium, if you're signing him now, maybe you're able to get him in the $7.5-ish million range, maybe $8 million really at the high end, but it's not going to be beyond that. So the way I look at it, like $7.5 million on an 8-year deal, 4 years from now, $7.5 million is going to be the new $5 million. So even if Buium doesn't hit his ceiling and he only becomes a 40 to 45 point guy, like that's still going to be totally reasonable contract value. And the upside case of if he becomes the 70-point guy and a top pair stud is you're going to have one of the best contracts in the NHL for this guy. And I think the Canucks in their rebuild phase, what else are they going to spend this money on? Right? Like, to me, roll the dice, take the risk, and try and set yourself up for 4 years down the line. We saw how much of a competitive advantage it was for the Canucks to have Quinn Hughes locked up under $8 million. Now, big picture didn't result in anything because of the incompetency of management, but you have that opportunity there where if he hits, that becomes the best contracts in the NHL. And if it doesn't pan out, like, I don't think the risk is it. Like, what else? Like, you're going to have so much cap space as a rebuilding team that I just think the risk to reward ratio kind of makes sense. And so that would be my case for, Buium's unproven and we don't know what the ceiling and the upside is, but with how high the cap is going, like, I look at Frank Nazar, what the Blackhawks did this past summer, right? So Nazar, he had 26 points in 53 games last season, right? So, like, showed some flashes, but hadn't really like fully proven himself. They went out and signed him to a deal making 6.6 on a long-term deal. He goes out World Championships, has a massive breakout. This year he's been a lot better, and he looks like their 2C of the future. Hawks are going to have a 2C of the future now at $6.6 million. Now, to do that, they had to give him $6.6 million before he had even really proven anything. So that's kind of the template that I look at.
No, and as always, you've done your homework and you make a compelling case without a doubt. And like the personality that is Zeev Buium, like I've seen people already talking about, this question of who's the next captain of the Vancouver Canucks. It's probably too soon to go down that road, but I do think he exhibits those types of traits and personalities. And man, in the locker room, like his teammates gravitate to him. You can see why you would want that sort of player in your system for a long time and playing a key role and all those types. Like, there's a ton to like there, without a doubt. But yeah, I mean, there's always risk. But to your point about Schaefer particularly, I mean, the things that he's doing at this stage are mind-boggling for an 18-year-old defenseman, and history is showing. Like, he's doing things that no other teenage defenseman's ever done. 32 minutes of ice time last night against the Blackhawks. So, it's probably not a fair comp to even invoke his name in a discussion like this one. My point is, you're seeing, though, what is possible at the highest of high ends with a young defenseman, and we just haven't seen that I would take a bunch of defensive blunders if the trade-off was a couple of plays that just blew us away that wound up in the opposition's net, and you thought, damn, like, sign this guy, like, sign me up for 8 years of this because I want to see as he grows. Like, that's going to be more on the regular. We're not seeing that, but again, I think that a lot of that comes back to the players he's surrounded with, the environment that he's in, and just the fact that nobody is doing that on this Vancouver Canucks team this season.
Last one before we let you go. Nikita Tolopilo hasn't started a game now in almost 2 weeks since that loss in Seattle where he let in a couple of really soft goals, to put it bluntly. And it seems like he's lost the trust of Adam Foote based on that game. What do you make of Tolopilo kind of riding the pine lately? And what are you expecting moving forward?
Well, I think it's time that he plays again. Some interesting comments from Adam Foote postgame last night about basically Lankinen giving the team more confidence. And basically, I think when he says that, he's saying that this group doesn't have full faith in Nikita Tolopilo. Now, that Bobby McMahon power play goal was dreadful. And, 1-1 tie late in the first period. We know the Canucks struggles all season, particularly at home. Get out of the first period in a 1-1 tie, fine. That was such a dagger And you could feel it. I think you were in the building that night. Like everybody sort of sagged and you thought like, oh my God, how does that go in? So that goal can't go in the National Hockey League. It did that night. And it feels a little unfair here. Like it feels like he's still paying a price a week and a half later for that bad goal. Where Kevin Lankinen, who has solidified his form since the trade deadline, and that's been good because it's been a dreadful season for him, but he wasn't great against a very good Tampa team. He was better against St. Louis, but the Blues aren't terribly high octane, and Blues had a couple of goals overturned as well. And then last night, like the Granlund power play goal, that's got to be a glove save and just keep the puck, hold the puck, and instead rebound kicked right back out, Granlund. And then the McTavish game winner, it's a good shot, but from distance that, in a 3-3 tie, again, you need that save. And so for a number of reasons, it just sort of feels like it's time to get back to Tolopilo. The Kings, as we said, they're going to be pushing for the playoffs, but they don't score a lot of goals. Outside of Adrian Kempe, I don't think they have another 40-point guy in their lineup. And so I would expect it to be relatively low event hockey, which kind of feels like the environment to get Tolopilo back in there. I don't need Kevin Lankinen to start 4 in a row. We saw last season when they started to play him in bunches. That's when his game seemed to sag a little bit. To me, it feels like it should probably be an even split the rest of the way with 12 left, kind of, or a win and you're in, I guess. And maybe you can find a way to, if a guy performs well, come back and give him another opportunity to back it up. But it's been a season full of curious deployment and decisions. And we outlined Evander Kane getting a late shift, and Curtis Douglas got a shift after Kane did in that St. Louis game when they were down and pressing for goals. And so when it comes to goaltending here as well, I don't know. To me, the St. Louis game on Saturday felt like the one to get Tolopilo back in there. They elected to keep running with Lankinen, but if Lankinen or if Tolopilo doesn't play on Thursday against the Los Angeles Kings, then I do think some difficult questions have to be asked. And I know Drance tried after the game last night to basically put that question to Adam Foote and got the runaround and a long-winded response that really didn't get to the heart of the matter. But if it's 5 in a row for Lankinen at this stage and Tolopilo sits yet again, I know they've got the back-to-backs next week. One is Colorado, one is Minnesota. Like, pick your poison there. I certainly hope there is a start for Nikita Tolopilo before he is thrown into either one of those games.
Jeff, great stuff. Really appreciate it. We will talk to you soon.
All right, boys, carry on. And we'll do it again next week.
There he is, Jeff Patterson, host of Rink Wide Vancouver. Check it out. Check him out. Check his workout at CanucksArmy.com as well. Fun conversation with Jeff. And it's really interesting because the Buium conversation, I was writing about it today, and the piece is going to be up later this afternoon, I think, on Canucks Army. But I was writing about the idea of an 8-year extension for Buium. And the more I was writing it, because I was thinking, I basically was trying to say, like, really, it was supposed to be a fun piece where I was just like, oh, could Buium be one of the last players in the game to sign an 8-year contract? And I was looking at the list of players that are RFAs this summer or are going to be eligible to sign contracts. And, you've got your Jason Robertsons, you've got your Connor Bedard's, and just these high-end players. And I know, especially obviously in the case of Robertson, we're not always talking about guys coming off their ELCs. And when you have conversations about those guys, Bedard aside, obviously, like generational talent, first overall pick aside, when you have those conversations, that's where you start to bring in the Buium part of the conversation. But I really liked what you had to say about the roll of the dice and what else are you going to spend the money on. I really liked that take. That's probably the way I'll kind of approach my thoughts on that as well. Moving forward here is just what else are you going to spend the money on?
And there are limits to it, obviously, right? Where if Buium's camp comes to you and says it has to be the Luke Hughes $9 million, or it has to be even $8.5 billion, that's where I might balk in that and say, all right, go out and prove it, right? You're not an RFA. You're only extension eligible. If you want to go that high and you're pushing towards comps that aren't really equivalent, especially the 9 million, like 8.5, I might still think about it. But if it's a straight 9 million, then I would retract that and say, you know what, that's okay. Let's revisit it further down the line. But if we're talking about, I can get it done at 7.5 or even max 8. Yeah. Sign me up all day. I
agree with you on that. And for the Canucks as well, they say, go out and prove it. guess what? When you come back and talk contract again next offseason, sorry, the max we can offer you is 7. So you just gave up a year of guaranteed money because you wanted to go out and prove it for another year. So very interesting. Very interesting conversation to have.
It is also like the best case example of this is when the Devils signed Jack Hughes to, remember that 8x8 contract?
Yeah.
I think it was 8 years. It was $8 million for sure, but they did it coming off, and I want to double check the exact date, but it was like Jack Hughes had that rookie year where he only had 21 points, right? Really tough first year in the league. And then his second year in the league, 31 points in 56 games. And immediately the Devils were like, we're willing to pay you $8 million, right? And you got to think about it this way too. That was 5 to 6 years ago. So in today's dollars, that's what, like around $10 million?
Yeah.
$10.5 million that they were willing to splash out for a guy that had proven barely anything in the NHL. And a lot of people were calling that an overpay, right? A lot of people were like, especially the Rangers fans that obviously have a rivalry with Devils fans, were calling Jack Hughes a bust. And, oh, that's going to be one of the worst contracts in the league. And then Jack Hughes, we know, has since turned into a star number 1 center, and it's one of the best contracts in the league. And that's kind of the risk, right? It's why a player like Buium would be compelled to sign that contract in the first place anyway, is, all right, it's a bit of an upfront risk on the team side that, hey, you have to improve to some degree for you to be worth this contract. And that's where, as a player, you're able to get a lot of guaranteed money before you've proven a lot in this league. It's hard to turn down all that guaranteed money. But then on the team side, it's okay, if you hit your ceiling case, this could be one of the best contracts in the league.
Yeah. We'll have more conversations about it down the line. You wanted to have a conversation about league-wide goalie trends. Would you like to do that now, or do you want to start anyone else and do it? What do you want to do?
We can, I mean, it's up to you. Like, this is, like, I had a lot of research on this. Like, this could on its own be like its own 20-minute conversation. So it's up to you whether you want to go to anyone else and save this conversation for tomorrow, or just like get into it now. I'm cool either way.
I hate doing this to people, but Jacob, can you change the title of the podcast? Because we're not going to talk about this today.
Yeah.
Put that
Yeah.
Let's
I gotta
park
change
that.
the title. I gotta make a new thumbnail now, so it's not clickbait.
Should we just have it now? We can have the conversation now. It's okay.
I can make the change. We talked enough about the potential Buium extension that we can make the new title and thumbnail around that.
Okay,
great.
You know what, Jacob? You know what I like about you, Jacob? I just trust you. You just do whatever you want, whatever you think is necessary. You can. I have the utmost confidence that you'll figure it out and make it work. So
yeah, I would hope so. Only been doing this for 2 years now, so.
My apologies, Jacob. It's just one of those things where I have so many thoughts on this goaltending piece I wrote yesterday that it could end up being long. And we're already 43 minutes into the show.
There's some people in the chat who read your article and are looking forward to the conversation. So just make sure you're back tomorrow.
Of course it will be.
That's great. That's great. We'll always do that. You know what? We should turn this into a thing with cliffhangers. Canucks Convo cliffhangers. Write it down, Jacob. Put it in my good ideas folder. I like that. Yeah, Spencer says live content planning on the show. Yeah, a little bait and switch on everybody. All right, let's get to anyone else, which is a presentation of our friends at Pacific Toyota Dealers and the Toyota Prius plug-in hybrid, a no-compromise approach to electric vehicles that offers the best of both worlds. Drive up to 72 kilometers on battery alone, enough to get you from downtown to the rink, the grocery store, and home to recharge. Seamlessly transition from electric mode to the gas engine for a combined range of 962 kilometers. There's no sacrifices when it comes to horsepower or style with its sleek, low, and wide exterior and sophisticated interior. It's loaded with tech that's actually easy to use. Plug in to recharge at home or at one of the over 2,000 public charging stations in BC alone. Visit shoptoyota.ca or your local Pacific Toyota dealer during Red Tag days from March through May. Marquitos in the chat said the good ideas folder is empty.
Before we move on, I can view our YouTube chat like live viewer numbers, and I can see it peaked right as we said we're not doing the goalie conversation anymore, and then people started leaving. So there we
That's
go.
funny. We'll still have good guys. Come back.
We're gonna have it off the top tomorrow.
Yeah.
You don't know that. Yeah, we are.
No, we are. I really want to have this goaltending conversation.
Yes, it's a good one. It's a good one. You had a good article in The Athletic. People should go read that as well. It'll help set up for tomorrow. Karin in the chat said, Jacob, book Harmon for tomorrow's show. Harmon will be here for tomorrow's show. We'll have a good time. And yeah, we'll play Family Feud. How are we on surveys, Jacob? Do we still need more?
We're a little light. So if you're in the YouTube chat, it's in the live chat. I know a bunch of people already went over. If you're listening to the audio podcast, we still will need survey responses. So please fill it out.
Okay, cool. Okay, this is cool. People now want to have a conversation about Liam Ogren's next contract, Harm. I have not thought about Liam Ogren's next contract. Have you?
Yeah. Well, not extensively, right? I haven't thought about comps and what type of cap hit, but
also extension eligible July 1st.
Yeah, I've seen enough to where, depending on the price, I'd be looking to lock him up. I just think the smart teams in the NHL are very aggressive and proactive about getting some of these deals done. You look at the Carolina Hurricanes last year, locking up Jackson Blake and Logan Stanko, and those contracts are going to age really well. And for Ogren as well, like I think there are enough tools there where I don't necessarily know if he's going to be the highest point producer moving forward, but I feel comfortable that at worst he's going to be like a top 9 player for a long time in this league with his speed, with the size, with the shot. I'd be thinking about it. I'm not maybe as banging the table about you have to go long on Ogren as I would on Buium, because I think Buium's ceiling is a lot higher, and therefore the upside of if you sign him to a long-term contract this summer is higher than it would be for Ogren. But I would be considering going longer on Ogren too. Maybe not 8 years necessarily, but certainly I wouldn't be thinking, oh, his next contract has to be a bridge.
Here's one. JLo threw this in the chat, and I'll ask you a different question. JLo in the chat said, what about Drew O'Connor's next contract? Drew O'Connor's next contract, Harm. I'm not even going to ask you what it looks like. Are the Vancouver Canucks the team signing Drew O'Connor's next contract? I don't think so.
I don't want them to be, presuming that he has a good year next year. And it's not because I don't like Drew O'Connor. I love Drew O'Connor as a player. He's having a terrific year, but ultimately he's going to turn 28 years old. And when I think of the next Canucks team that is actually going to do damage, I don't know if he's going to be part of that timeline, right? Is he going to be 32 years old by the next time the Canucks make the playoffs? And we know that for bottom 6 players, especially, I'm just a believer that you want to, for the most part, churn those guys, right? You find a good bottom 6 guy. Once he ages out, you don't want to do what the Oilers did with Trent Frederick, right? Where you just give a bottom 6 guy a bunch of term, especially when it's a guy that's late 20s, because those guys can sometimes hit a wall and they're just a replaceable player type. And especially if O'Connor has another productive year ahead of the deadline next year, he'd be a really valuable deadline piece with the speed, with the size, with the secondary scoring ability, reliable defensively. And when we look at this Canucks roster, they just don't have many trade chips that would get you something meaningful. So I'm not going to say like super cut and dry. The Canucks definitely can't be the next team. Like under no circumstances, I'm not going to be dramatic about it that way. But if you're asking me today, I would prefer to peddle him as a trade chip rather than be the team that extends him.
Okay, I want to have a quick conversation about the Ottawa Senators. Okay, we didn't talk about it yesterday, but a few nights ago, they lose Thomas Chabot, and it looks like it's going to be long-term. Takes a cross-check from JT Miller. Travis Green probably didn't love that. Takes a cross-check from JT Miller, and if you saw it, it was right above the glove and right below where your elbow guard goes. And now as someone that's played the game, Harm, and has put on equipment for a month now, you're very exposed there. You're very, very exposed. So he got the cross-check right there, it looked like, and he's out long-term. That's horrible news for the Senators who are fighting for a playoff spot. Silver lining, and very, very faint silver, Yakimchuk scores in his debut, makes his NHL debut right after that. Carter Yakimchuk, of course, makes his NHL debut, scores in his debut. It's not all bad in Senators land. they still control their destiny. Like, it's not all bad, but that was a tough blow. But they pick up a big 2 points against the Detroit Red Wings yesterday. Excuse me, sorry.
They're
They
in a
pick up
wild card
big-
spot now.
Yeah, they're in a wild card spot. Like, that was a really important 2 points for them because they are obviously racing against the Detroit Red Wings for that playoff spot.
Yeah, they're in such an interesting spot because no Sanderson, no Shabbat. So when you look at their projected D pairs on Daily Faceoff right now, it looks pretty ugly. You got a projected top pair of Tyler Klevin and Artem Zub, second pair of Spence, Matt and Paulo, and then Jorian Donovan. I don't even know who that is. And then Carter Yakimchuk. So you're really hoping one of your established veteran defensemen can come back soon. I don't even see Jensen in that. Is Jensen out too? Yeah, Jensen's listed as day-to-day as well. So you need some of these bodies to come back on the blue line. But having said that, I think I heard Steve Valaket on Kipper and Bourne talking about how the Senators, since the Olympic break, are the best team in the NHL at controlling high danger chances, right? Offensively, defensively, overall differential. They're just dominating teams. And we saw it when they played the Rangers earlier this week, where they limited the Rangers to 9 shots on goal in that entire game. So just structurally, they've found something special, I think, there under Travis Green. And the key too is their goaltending seems to be stabilizing a little bit since the Olympic break. So for me, if the goaltending can hold up, I still think they have enough momentum built. They've won 4 in a row. They're 8-2 in their last 10. They are red hot in the Eastern Conference. They're in a wild card spot now, so it's not as if they're catching up and playing from behind, essentially.
You don't need to leapfrog anyone.
You don't need to leapfrog anybody. There's still enough there to where they may not collapse. Like, they could hold on to this thing. They're a very good team.
And how much have we talked about how bad their goaltending's been? Last night, Linus Ullmark, 33 saves on 35 shots. The Senators, you could probably count on one hand how many times the Senators gave up more than 30 shots, registered less than 25 themselves, and won the game. You could probably count on one hand how many times that's happened this season, but that's what happened last night. Like I said, a big 2 points for them, picking up the win in regulation. That obviously really matters at a time like this, when you're playing against a team that's chasing you like the Red Wings are. Or excuse me, not chasing. The Red Wings were, I guess, actually ahead of them last night, but a team that's in that conversation with you, picking up a win in regulation, super, super important. I also wanted to talk about the New York Islanders. And again, I think we're going to have a bigger conversation quickly, as quick as we can, I guess, about the Eastern Conference playoff run. Playoff race. We talked about it a little bit yesterday, but the Islanders lose last night as well. Slowly but surely, do you think that the shine is coming off the Islanders a little bit right now at the worst possible time?
It is. I think that team has, to some degree, been carried by goaltending all year, right? So this is where the Islanders, they have some fun parts of them offensively, right? We know with Schaefer, with Bo Horvat, with Matt Barzal, they've got guys that can create. They like to attack off the rush, but losing Kyle Palmieri, right? I think it was Palmieri. They've been shorthanded in the top 6 for a while, and defensively they give up a lot, right? And yeah, Palmieri is on IR. I believe he tore his ACL and it's basically done for the season. They don't control play very well, and it's just, hey, Sorokin's probably the front runner for the Vezina Trophy right now. So really, they're going to go as far as I think Sorokin takes them. It is interesting that if you look at Tankathon's remaining strength of schedule.
Yeah, what does it say? Because I was just going to talk about their schedule. What does it say?
I think all the teams in the East are right near the top of that list, just because it's sorted by the points percentage of the teams that they're going to face. And because they're mostly facing teams that are in the East, and the East is way better than the West, like they're all kind of in the same boat, right? You got Boston has the toughest schedule in the league. Islanders have the second toughest, but Ottawa's 4th. So there's not a wide difference. Even the Red Wings are 9th as well. And then if you look at the bottom 10 teams for strength of schedule, it's basically all Western Conference teams. It's LA, Colorado, Anaheim, Vegas, San Jose, Utah, Edmonton, Chicago. So I think they're all on relatively level playing field when it comes to opponent quality and the schedule.
I was going to say, I think New York must be a top team, the top 2 team in that regard, because they've got Dallas. Florida's not what they used to be, obviously, but they've got Pittsburgh. They've got Buffalo coming up. They've got the Hurricanes twice still. I think they have the Habs twice as well. No, Habs once. Excuse me, Habs once. But yeah, they play a game against Ottawa as well. How fun could that game be? That's their third to last game of the season on April 11th. It's going to be a very tight race to the finish, and it's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on for sure. But yeah, wanted to have a quick conversation about the Senators. Anything else on your mind, Harm?
Nope.
Okay, well, let's do it, Jacob. It's time for Tankathon.
Yes, and before we get to Tankathon, mentioning the Ottawa Senators, that actually is going to impact some stuff when it comes to the lottery. So a couple weeks ago, we talked about how, with the change in how Ottawa is being punished for, it was the Dadonov contract, right?
Yep.
So the way that it was originally intended had changed, and the clarification was Ottawa is now just ineligible to win the lottery. If Ottawa were selected to win the lottery, assuming they missed the playoffs, there would be a redraw for the lottery, which would technically mean that the Canucks actually have slightly better odds, because in the chance that Ottawa wins, now you have to redraw and the Canucks still have the best odds amongst everybody. So we're talking about less than 0.5% difference. If Ottawa makes the playoffs, then you have 16 teams who could win the lottery. There's no chance for a redraw. So technically, if Canucks fans want the best possible odds for the Canucks, you're hoping Ottawa misses the playoffs and is involved in the lottery that they can't technically win. So I'm not a math major. I can't break down the probabilities live on the show, but when the way it was explained to me would lead to believe the Canucks have slightly better odds if Ottawa's involved. Anyways, it's time for Tankathon.
That was a good explanation. Thanks for that, Jacob. That was good.
Oh, thank you. I did the best I could. Again, I was a communications major, not very good at math.
That's one more major than Harmon and I have.
Yeah, but
okay, let's do it.
Let's just say I don't really use much of my my university education in the work I do now. I use a little bit, not a lot. All right. Without further ado, let's get to it. Canucks have the best odds. We've got, was it 2 wins in a row? It is. Canucks,
yeah, it is. Yeah.
We've got 2 wins in a row this week. Rangers have the second best odds. Chicago at 3. Calgary at 4. Here's our sim. 3 in a row for the Vancouver Canucks.
This segment's awesome.
How the how the tables have turned for our Tankathon results. Chicago moves up, which means the Rangers drop down to number 3. Now, I'll point out here, because Chicago moves up to second, that would be it. They can't win the lottery again for, I guess it would be a few more years, because it would be the Levshinov pick 5 years from that point. So I think that'd be 2 more years after this that Chicago won't be able to move up. So
imagine Levshinov is the reason you can't go up again. Anyway, that was a good segment. I like that. Joshua Phillips said, when you book that scientist, you can get them to explain probabilities to you as well. That was good. I like that. And Nick Robinson pointed this out as well. This also matters. Toronto getting the highest possible result without getting to keep their pick. That's important too. Obviously, the Brandon Carlo trade. If it's not top 5.
I'll be honest. If I'm a Leafs fan, I actually would prefer to give the pick up this year, because the issue for them is then they owe a future unprotected pick, and they already don't they already don't have their 27. So then you'd be looking at, you don't own your 27 and 28 first round pick. Meanwhile, Austin Matthews might leave.
Yeah.
Or might not want to be here.
Yep.
That's a nightmare scenario. If I'm the Leafs, I would prefer to, just as painful as it is, just understanding how bleak the future could be, just especially because once you get outside of really past Gavin McKenna and Ivar Stenberg, it's not like the top of this draft class is really that special.
Sure.
For me, I'd just rather get off and pay that price now. It sucks, but then not have that future liability hanging over my head.
Fair enough. I hadn't thought about that.
LC250 with a question, like for the protected first round picks, do they get resolved before or after the lottery? It's after the lottery, right?
Yeah.
But even then, like I know they wouldn't do it, but in theory, the Leafs could still give up their pick even if they're in the top 5, right? Like if they're picking 5th, they don't have to give the pick up to Boston because of the protections, but they, in theory, would still be allowed to say, you know what, we'll cut the protections. You can have our 5th overall pick this year. We're keeping the future pick.
And that completes the trade. Yeah.
And that completes the trade. So it's the Leafs, they're not beholden to the protections. Those are just there as protections, as it says, right? If a pick is in the top 5, the Leafs do not have to give it up, but they still can if they choose to. And all of that can be dealt with after the lottery, whenever the Leafs are ready to make the decision.
I'm not exaggerating when I say that that's one of the worst trades they've made in franchise history. Not just the potential of giving up a really high draft pick, but Fraser Minten in Boston, 21-year-old center. He's already up to 16 goals and 31 points in 71 games. And he was always billed as a two-way type. So you know the type of player that Minton's going to develop into, the center that he is. He's already established a pretty high like offensive floor, and he's potentially going to be a defensive driver. Like that guy's going to be so valuable.
This might be a little too hindsighty for me, Harm, because you're trying to win a cup and they needed defense last year. Yeah. Like you were trying to win a cup.
It looked defensible at the time, but the result is is awful.
Okay, sure. It might, but I don't know.
Dude, you're giving up a guy that's going to be potentially a top 6 center for a decade plus, when you know how hard centers are to find, and when John Tavares isn't going to be able to play top 6 center minutes for you in a while. They're so desperate for young talent, and on top of that, you're potentially giving up like a top 10 draft pick this year or a future unprotected first when you don't know the state of your franchise moving forward. Like that's a disaster of a trade. Again, I understand why they made that at the time. I'm not going to claim to a year ago be saying, oh, what an awful trade, but the result is the result. It's aging horribly.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
And Harm, we know there's a big block of defensemen available in that range. Like what are the chances that, Boston picking 6th overall drafts a defenseman who turns out to be a better player than Brandon Carlo? I think that's totally
a really good
reasonable,
point. Yeah,
right? They might end up with their 2C and a younger, future, better defenseman than Brandon Carlo in a trade that kind of worked out perfectly for the Bruins, where they missed the playoffs last year and then came right back into contention the year after. I think you're right, Harm. At the time made sense, but the hindsight on this one, and I'm thinking about the video essays that are going to be written 15 years from now. It'll be a really interesting one to look back on.
Mike in the Valley said probabilities is probably the least understood discipline in mathematics. Can you name like 3 disciplines in mathematics? Like calculus, that's
geometry.
One. Yeah, geography.
Geography.
All right, let's get to our Bet365 bet of the day. Tonight, the MLB season is back, folks. Baseball is back. The New York Yankees are taking on the San Francisco Giants. Absolute cinema. I can't wait for this game.
Is this the start of the regular season?
This is the regular season.
Oh, this is opening. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then tomorrow, you've got Mariners play the Guards. Jays play the A's, but that doesn't start till Friday. Jacob?
Yeah. The Jays are one of 6 teams that have to wait till Friday for their first game.
Yeah, sucks to suck. But the MLB season starts tomorrow, or the rest of the games start tomorrow. I'm so excited. I'm so excited for baseball, man. And just there's so many different storylines with the MLB season that I want to talk about, and I'm gonna stop myself. Last one. Shohei Ohtani, did you see his final spring tune-up? Pitched 4 innings and he got 11 strikeouts. 11 strikeouts in 4 innings in a spring training game. And now he's talking about Dave Roberts, their manager, is like, oh yeah, Shohei has a stated goal to win the Cy Young and MVP this year and the batting title. He's coming for it all. So we're about to witness history, I think, with Shohei Ohtani, like we do every year. But I think this is going to be a massive season for Shohei Ohtani, and we're all going to bear witness to it, and it's going to be incredible. But tonight, everything gets started with the Yankees taking on the Giants. Speaking of good pitchers putting up a lot of strikeouts, you know I like my strikeout props. I am going with Max Fried, the starter for the Yankees tonight. Good left-handed arm. I think he's going to stifle the Giants' bats. Again, you look up and down that lineup. Luis Rise comes to mind as a guy who might be able to put the bat on the ball as a lefty, but beyond that, I think Max Fried's going to rack up the Ks against the Giants tonight. I am taking Max Fried 6 or more strikeouts at plus 155 odds. You can get that over at Bet365. Every sports fan will tell you that not all games are created equal. Sometimes the excitement just isn't there. Sometimes you get a dud. It happens. But at Bet365, boring games are a thing of the past. Now there's always a reason to tune in, even if the score isn't one of them. And while they can't make every game exciting, they can help fans get excited about every game. Bet365, download the app today. Must be 19 or older. Please play responsibly. Any baseball takes you want to throw out there, Harm?
Dude, it's wild how when I first came on the show full time, I hated baseball talk. And now you've converted me into joining the league you're in to actually play, which
probably teammates. We might end up being teammates.
Yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed. And now the Jays run last year definitely helped, but now I'm genuinely kind of interested in baseball season, and I will be keeping an eye. So man, it's been a 180 degree flip.
And what did Jacob and I told you? Like, we told you that baseball is in a really good spot right now. Like, baseball is getting a lot more eyeballs on it now. These rule changes have been really, really good. ABS coming in. Jacob, do you agree with me? I think ABS is going to create even more fans of baseball. I think this is another, they knocked this one out of the park. No pun intended. But seriously, I think they've absolutely crushed it with this rule change as well. You're not going to see games decided on some 90-year-old white guy behind the plate that can't see straight. I think it's going to be great.
Well, and we saw a game end on a terrible strike call at the World Baseball Classic. It's why the Dominican Republic lost to the U.S. Now, there's still, it's not like it exactly cost them. They should have won the game anyways. They just didn't play well. But to see a game end like that on a world stage, it's good to know going back to MLB now. Shouldn't happen again, assuming teams don't abuse their challenges and lose them in the third inning, which it seems like most teams haven't done throughout spring training. So
it's also going to be funny because there's definitely going to be players that their manager is like, you're not allowed to challenge pitches. There's going to be players that they're told you aren't allowed to challenge pitches, which is also going to add a fun dynamic. And Kelly Canuck raining on the parade by saying, yeah, baseball's in a good spot until the lockout, which might happen next year. Probably going to happen next year. Hopefully not, though. Hopefully it's all figured out. No lockout this season. Starts tonight. I'm excited for it. We'll be back tomorrow. Talk about some goaltending. We'll actually talk about what we intended to talk about today. And yeah, we'll be back tomorrow. We'll have lots to talk about. We'll play Family Feud as well. Fill out your survey if you haven't already. But we will close it out there for my co-host, Harmon Dial, and our technical producer, Jacob Lazar. My name is Dave Quadrelli. Thanks so much for of Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.